So thank you, everybody. My name is Gil Student, and I recently published this book that we're here to launch officially. That's Search Engine Volume 2. So just to give you a little background on what it is and who I am, I know I'm not such a stranger to the shul, and I'd like to thank Rabbi Weiss and the shul for welcoming me here multiple times. No stranger to the shul, the community, which is also very welcoming. So I write on the internet a lot. I've had a website, Torah Musings, which I've been writing on for about 14 years. And about 5 years ago already, we turned it from a blog into a web magazine. And the difference between that is twofold. Number one, a blog has a lot of comments and user interaction in social media. Magazine is comments are highly discouraged. We treat it like letters to the editor, which have to be reviewed and could be edited and rewritten like every respectable publication. The other is I have an editorial board, so I can't go crazy, and I have to be responsible, and they keep me honest. So over 4 years worth of the online magazine, I've covered a lot of topics that have been some of them have been extremely controversial, some have been considered entertaining. So in the first volume, I have a whole series on superheroes in halacha. I think I once spoke in the shul about it, superheroes in halacha. If a superhero was shomer Torah mitzvos, what would be the halachas of some elastic man who could reach his hand over to New Jersey and pick something up on Shabbos? Can he carry it over to New York, or is there a problem with that? Things like that. Are you allowed to go invisible on Shabbos? Is that mechika, racing? It's fun. It's fun. It's a fun way to discuss halachic questions. And also more practical and serious questions about minhagim and nidarim, vows and customs. What can you take? When can you change? How do you change a custom? So I have a little section on that. Every section is very short. Because I write for the internet, I realize people, myself included, have very short attention spans. So everything is short, and I try to keep it brief and to the point. The second volume is a little more serious. It's about issues of leadership, Jewish leadership. Who could be a rabbi? Who could be an authority? Who could ask in a question? And that brings us to key issues that are central to our definition of a community in the modern era. And also controversial issues. How do you release an aguna? How do you deal with other issues that our community has struggled with, and that let's say the Rabbinical Council of America, where for a number of years I was on the executive committee during key debates. And so there's some op-eds that I wrote in various newspapers, Haaretz, the Forward, to discuss these issues that I included in this volume as well. In addition to other just more existential questions, I very often write for a newspaper in Teaneck, Bergen County, New Jersey, the Jewish Link of New Jersey. And there I discuss more issues of who we are as modern Orthodox Jews. I know the term modern Orthodox is controversial, it means different things in different communities. I'm using in this particular shul, in a positive sense. If I'd go down a few blocks, it would be used in a negative sense. So here I mean more Orthodox Jews in the modern era, who try to be part of the world, but are shomer Torah and mitzvahs and hashkafa and halacha 100%. We're 100% from, but we live in the modern world. So how does that work? Because what's the modern world about? What's the modern era about? What was the emancipation? For the past 200, 300 years, the modern era has been about independence, autonomy, being ourselves, making our own decisions. And what's the Torah about? The Torah is about submission, submitting yourself to the Torah, to authority, to rabbis, to halacha, to Torah, to Hashem. So how can we be modern and still be Orthodox? It's a contradiction in terms. So that's a lot of what I deal with in the second volume. But in particular, so we live in unprecedented times. If you've lived at all in the past 200 years, that's what you've heard every single generation. It's unprecedented. So it's a bit of a cliche. So it's actually an extreme cliche, but it's 100% true. So we shouldn't overstate the case. I talked to my grandmother, Alea Shalom, who grew up in Poland in between the wars. So World War I dislocated huge Jewish communities and had tremendous impact. Those were unprecedented times, and there was a real people had lived in the same town in Eastern Europe for centuries, and then suddenly everybody's moved around. And you had a tremendous dislocation, change of community, change of minhag. The entire next generation, a large portions of the next generation of Orthodoxy had a totally different view. They went from the shtetl to Warsaw, to the big city, or from the small town to the big town. And it was traumatic. It was traumatic. And even before that, you had socialism and communism, when the Tsar was overthrown. Even before that, there were pogroms. Those are unprecedented times as well. So what's the difference between now and when I was a kid? So there are many differences, but let's focus on one that comes to mind immediately, and that's the internet. I remember the first time I went on the internet. I remember the first time I used email. So this is tremendous blessing in many ways. So before we start criticizing the internet, we'll talk a little bit about the blessings of the internet. Number one, many of your menial tasks are suddenly much, much easier, whether it's reminders or communication. It's much, much better. GPS, right? I used to get lost all the time. Now I have to really work hard to get lost because the GPS helps me out. Baruch Hashem, I'm very talented. I can still get lost, but it takes effort. I used to go to the New York Public Library a lot. They have an incredible Judaica selection. I worked like 2 blocks away, and it was unbelievable. I could go during lunch and take out Sfarim from throughout the centuries, rare Sfarim. They would bring it to me on special and then let me look through the manuscripts. Incredible. I don't go to the library anymore. I just go to HebrewBooks.org or to, the Ozar HaSfarim. There's so many, everything is online. Almost everything you could want is online. For some reason, the Tshuva Maharam Shik, it's very hard to find even online. But almost everything you could ever want is online. Tremendous amounts of information. On my phone, I have more information than they had in the ancient Library of Alexandria. It's incredible. It's beautiful. And it's not only that, it's the Gemara in Avodah Zarah. Yutes Amud Aleph says, so, Halom Torah Mirav Echad and Erosim and Bracha L'Olam. If you learn Torah from one Rebbe, you're not going to see a bracha on that. You need multiple perspectives. You need to find multiple Rebbes. So it used to be, and if you're in one yeshiva, you get that one Rosh Yeshiva, he is your Rebbe, that's it, you follow his derech, and that was it. Then you came out and you had the rabbi of your shul. Nowadays, you could go to Torah anytime. You could find the rabbi who speaks to your neshama, you could find your derech that way. And I'm not even talking about not becoming from or anything like that, Khalila. I'm talking about just finding the rabbi who speaks to you. You could find another rebbe, you could learn from different perspectives. You could go to yutorah.org. Thousands, tens of thousands of shiurim there. And you could find different ways of learning that appeal to you, different subjects of learning that appeal to you. It's incredible opportunities. On the other hand, the onslaught of emails and texts and WhatsApps and everything is so overwhelming. Constant communication. It used to be, if you're a workaholic, it meant you were in the office all the time. Now, everyone takes the office with them, with the laptops and the Wi-Fis and the emails on your phones. It used to be Blackberries, now it's everywhere. It's overwhelming. There's also distraction. So, 10 years ago, there was no such term, binge watching. But nowadays, we're all distracted between the games and the media and the social media and the news, and they design it cynically. People in Silicon Valley say this outright openly. They design it cynically to drag us in. They want us to stay on their websites and their games and their apps more and more. They're trying to draw us in and addict us. And additionally, this all boils down to a decreased attention span, which we all know. We live in a TLDR, right? Too long didn't read era. When I was a kid, it started Sesame Street. Sesame Street was designed to keep our attention constantly, with constant moving little segments. And that, they said, killed my generation. And then came the internet, and it took it to another level. And everybody's distracted. Nobody's really paying attention to one screen at one time. You have to have at least 2 screens open. And even when you're talking, nobody reads all the way to the bottom of an article. You have to put all the information in the first paragraph or 2 because nobody's going to read to the end. And rabbis have to be infotainers nowadays. Used to be a Soloveitchik would get up and give a shiur for 4 hours. I can't even imagine sitting still for 4 hours, much less listening to someone. So rabbis have to be storytellers. And the problem is twofold. Number one, not everyone who's a scholar is a good storyteller. You could be a big Talmud Chacham and you can't tell a good story. I've been speaking for how long? How many minutes? 5, 7, 8, 10 minutes? I haven't told a single story yet. I violated every rabbinic rule in the book. And then you have the good storytellers. So they're dangerous. Some of them are narcissists. Some of them are just charismatic personalities who cause other various problems, cult figures. We have that in our community as well. It's a big problem. And I'm not going to point fingers, and that's really not my place, and this is not the time for it. But we have such problems, and every community has such problems, and part of it is what we as an audience, as a community, are looking for. That's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about something a little more, and I realize I'm not going to talk for too long. I have a captive audience, and that's not what you came for. The democratization of knowledge is a blessing, and it's a curse. So it used to be 2,000 years ago, the Torah was transmitted orally from teacher to student, right? So what did that mean? It meant to become an expert, you had to spend many years studying personally with a mentor. You had to have a phenomenal memory just to even qualify as someone who is a scholar. So and everyone else had to defer to the experts. That's all we could do. So I can't prove it, but I suspect that one way to reduce rabbinic influence of the Sadducees and the Karaites was to say, forget about this whole oral Torah. I mean, not forget about all of it, but they set it aside. They lowered the barrier to becoming an expert so more people could be experts. That's the way you take power from authority, is you spread authority even more. So who needs the rabbis? I can read the Bible. I'm a Karaite Talmud Chacham already. I can read Tanakh. Even today, if you can read Tanakh already, you're a Talmud Chacham. You've gone through the whole thing. But that's the way to take the power away from the rabbis and say, we don't need this, because learning Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral Torah, was so hard. So then the Talmud was written, right? But the manuscripts were rare, they're very expensive, and it's overwhelming. It's so long. It takes 7.5 years just to go page by page using the Vilna Shas. It's huge, it's overwhelming. Then came the printing press. And after the printing press, then came the summaries. Then came the Shulchan Aruch. People used to scream about the Shulchan Aruch. You're making Amoratzim pretend to be Talmidei Chachamim. He's a rabbi, all he knows is Shulchan Aruch. He doesn't know Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, Rosh, Rambam, Rif. They used to say that. And then came Bar Heitev. Bar Heitev, the rabbis used to curse out the Bar Heitev, because he summarizes the Magen Avraham, the Shach, the Taz. You think you know something, you can pretend to be a rabbi. You can pretend you know the Shach and the Taz, because you should see it in the summary. And by the time the Mishnah Berurah came, nobody was cursing him out already. They were used to it. But look, there are people go around thinking they know halacha because they know the Mishnah Berurah. But the fact is, it's a superficial knowledge. You can't read a summary and understand all the nuances and layers that go into the halacha. So now, where are we now? We have Google, we have responsive databases, we have internet, we have blogs, we have all this stuff where everybody's pretending to be. You don't even have to know how to read Hebrew to be able to Google a halachic subject and think you have mastered it. And if you've spent a few years in yeshiva, so with a few internet searches and database searches, you could put together a pretty impressive article. That's not expertise. That's superficial knowledge masquerading as expertise. It cannot compare. So the Gemara in Sotah Chafalef Amud Beis says, who's a Chassid Shoteh? So Chassid Shoteh is a foolish, pious person. So one answer in the Gemara is a little famous. It's if a man sees a woman drowning in the river and says, I can't touch her because it's not sneistic, and he lets her drown. That's foolish piety. That's crazy. So Ula says something else. Ula has a different answer, not disagreeing, but a different answer. It's someone who was Kara, Veshana, Veloshimesh, Talmidei Chachamim. So he learned Tanakh, he learned Mishnah, so he learned Halacha, but he didn't serve under masters. He didn't have a Rebbe to teach him the explanations of it. So Rashi says, you think you know the Halacha because you know Aleph Beis, this do and don't, but you don't understand the underlying meaning. You need depth of analysis in order to be a Talmid Chacham. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, Mem Beis Amud Aleph, says, where do you find people who fight, who argue over Torah? People who have many packages of Mishnah. So Rashi explains, what does this mean? It means anyone can come up with a svara, an idea. It must be mutter because of this and that. You have to have the chavilas, the packages, many different Mishnayos, and you can bring proofs. Anyone can come up with a svara, with an idea, with an analysis. You have to prove it. You have to have the breadth that matches the depth. I remember in yeshiva, there was a guy in YU, if you're, let's say, a Baal Tshuva comes post-college, so they won't put him just straight into the smicha program. They'll put him into what they call a pre-smicha program, which is a fake program. Just learn a little, and then we'll see whether you're ready to get into the smicha program. So remember, a guy in the pre-smicha program, he had worked as an accountant. He'd become from later in life. I remember him telling me, just in the dorm, telling me he can analyze just like the best of the guys in the Beis Medrash. The only difference is he doesn't have the breadth of knowledge that they have. You don't. That's all you don't have. That's a key element of being a Talmid Chacham, is having that breadth of knowledge. So you need both breadth and depth. And what we have today is people masquerading as Talmidei Chachamim, paskening shilos when they really unqualified to do so. And present company included, myself included. So who are the leaders today? Who can be the leaders today? So as we just discussed, you need to be a Torah leader, you need to have breadth and you need to have depth. You need to be a serious scholar. You can't just be a joke. You can't be just an internet rabbi. You even have internet smichas, you know that, right? Correspondence. The program is serious. You do have to learn, say, Mishabura very well. That's smicha. You do have to learn Hilchos Kashrus, Basa B'cholav, and Tarovis very well. But what about all the background? What about the Gemara? What about the Rashban, the Ritva, Rashi, Tosas, the Rush? So that, not so much. I don't think they test on that. So to call someone rabbi, to give someone a degree, encourages them to learn. So I'm all for people learning more, and if the degree helps them learn more, good. But we also have to know, if you get smicha from an online smicha, so just the degree alone doesn't confer authority. You shouldn't be paskening shilas. You should only be paskening shilas if you have the depth and breadth necessary to understand it. You have to. So sometimes you see people, especially online, but elsewhere as well, a shiloh will come up and they'll look at the Gemara and they'll sit there and they'll work very hard on the Gemara, very hard. They'll look at the commentaries and the Shulchan Aruch and they'll reach a conclusion. Based on the first time they ever opened up the Gemara and they saw it, they reach a conclusion. You can't paskin the first time you read a Gemara. You have to see that Gemara dozens of times. Every time you learn a Gemara, you see more depth. The first time, paskin based on it, that's wild. The people who are paskening have decades of experience learning the Gemara over and over and over. Ha-pochba, and only then do you see the kulaba. You can't paskin based on the first time you read a Gemara. That's insane. It's irresponsible. And I don't paskin shilos, because I'm not that irresponsible. So leadership today, I would say that there are two aspects that we have to understand in order to realize who are the leaders today. Who can be the leaders today? Not only people with the background and expertise. So number one is a distinction I learned from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. And that's between, he distinguishes, I don't think he made this up, between what he calls authority and influence. Authority is top-down, it's controlling, it's binding. It orders you to do things. So a police officer is there to serve and to protect, right? But when he tells you to do something, you obey, because he has governmental authority to order you around. To a degree, we all have rights, but to a degree. Police officer is an authority. Influence is bottom up. Influence convinces us. And influencer inspires. They allow us to choose and draw us in to where they think we should go. So in the pre-modern world, rabbis were authorities. They had legal authority. In the modern world, they have social pressure, which in different communities can have different force. Nowadays, the real leaders are the influencers, the people who convince us, the people who inspire us, who draw us in. So with all the problems we discussed of charismatic rabbis, they're the ones who wield the most power today, the most influence today. They're the true leaders. The true leaders are the ones who, they can have a great job. They can have on their wall, they can say, Gadol Hador. But you know what? Unless people care what you say, you're not the Gadol of anything. You have to convince people to listen to you. When Rabbi Yoshev Paskin, he had no authority. Who was he? He was only somebody because we all cared who he was. Reverse Shechta, so he's the Rosh Kollel and YU. So if you're not in the Kollel, so how does he affect you? Because you care what he says. That's why. You want to follow him. And you're Shul Rabbi. So why does he have any authority over you? You take your shilas to him. Do you have to follow him? Well, because you believe you have to follow him. You choose to follow his psak halacha. And it's important to follow psak halacha of somebody, and in Yeshua Rabbi, I have a whole chapter in there about that. But that's something that we choose. Today, the rabbis have to influence us. And you don't need a job, you don't need a title to influence. You could be a nobody to influence. Who was a Chavetz Chaim? He didn't have smicha till later in his life. He was a Rosh Yeshiva in a small town. There's stories about his small town attitude, because he lived in a small town in Russia. But everybody, the Jews all over the world cared what he had to say. And that's why he was so powerful, so influential, not because of a title, not because who he was or his position, but because he influenced, because people cared. So there's a Yerushalmi in Sota that talks about Yoshiyahu HaMelech, when he found a Sefer Torah in the Beis HaMikdash. And they read it, and the pasuk, the Yerushalmi says, the pasuk that they read was Arur Asher Lo Yakim Es Divrei HaTorah Hazos. Cursed is the one who doesn't uphold the words of this Torah. And Yoshiyahu was crying, he tore his shirt in mourning, and he said, Alai lahakim, it's on me to uphold the Torah. So Rebelsky once at a smicha ceremony, he looked to the audience and he said, everyone here should be saying Alai lahakim. You want to be a leader, it's not that you're appointed, it's not that you get a job, it's that you take it on yourself the responsibility to uphold the Torah. And that's what a leader is. So I'll give you one example that's in the news. So the measles outbreak that recently happened, if you've been following community politics lately, it's because there's a large group of people, or at least a contributing factor, who do not vaccinate their kids in our community. And people are now saying, well, where are the rabbis? Why aren't the rabbis condemning it? So the truth is, we all knew about this 5 years ago. Don't pretend you didn't. I've known about it for 20 years. So where were the rabbis then? I'll tell you where the rabbis were. They were telling people to vaccinate their kids. Not every rabbi, almost every rabbi was saying, vaccinate your kids. But you know what? People don't care. People don't care. And rabbis have limited influence, limited bandwidth, and what can they do? They can issue an announcement saying everybody has to vaccinate, and nobody will change their behavior whatsoever. They can say, don't accept those kids into yeshiva, and you know what? The yeshivas don't care either. Yeshivas will do what they want. And sometimes some rabbis have said yeshivas have to accept kids who are not vaccinated, and the yeshiva said, no, I don't care. I'm accepting who I want. You don't have any authority. They have no authority. So how is that solved? How can that problem be solved? So I have a theory of how it will be solved, and it's based on pediatricians who will say, I will not see kids who are not vaccinated. And you know what? Every parent has to take their kid to the pediatrician. And if every from pediatrician or every pediatrician who serves a from community would say that, problem would be solved very quickly. Where do the rabbis come in? It's not the rabbis who solve it. It's you. Any one of us can get up and organize this to happen. Rabbis aren't going to organize it. So in summary, I've spoken too long already. So in the modern era, change happens. Change is constant. And it's up to us not to say, where are the rabbis? Where are the leaders? It's up to us to be the leaders. Whether you listen to an influencer, or you're an influencer yourself, or you find one subject where you think you could be. We like in this community, we like to make fun of the term askan. If you read the Flatbush Jewish Journal, it's like an ongoing joke for years that they make fun of the term askan. Askan is someone who's involved. Get involved. The leaders are the people who choose to get involved. And if you don't choose to get involved, where are the leaders? It's us who aren't doing anything. You can't expect other people to do it. Leaders are the people who step up to the plate. So with that, I'll end. And copies of the book are available, and we can sign and we can talk, we can schmooze a little more. Thank you very much.